As I write these words, I still don't know what to do. Or rather, I know that sooner or later, the truth is going to come out and everything will blow up. But at the same time, I have a lump in my throat that keeps me from speaking. I'm scared because 2 months ago, I discovered a terrible secret that my family had been hiding for years. A secret that only my cousin and I didn't know. These 2 months feel like a lifetime. 2 months of silence. 2 months of guilt. And during that time, I've been avoiding my cousin. I've been avoiding my aunt and uncle. Honestly, I've been avoiding myself because deep down, I feel like I always knew something was off. Something didn't quite add up. But I've always been good at ignoring signs, at pretending everything's fine. After all, I was just a kid, and kids believe adults without question. Until I couldn't make excuses anymore. When I was around 5, my cousin came into our family. I remember my aunt and uncle had been away for a long time, and it always seemed strange to me. We're a close family. We've always been. And that long absence left a mark I couldn't understand back then. I also remember he wasn't like other babies. He wasn't as small. When, in my childish innocence, I asked my aunt why, she got irritated. And my mom immediately apologized, as if I had said something inappropriate. There were so many other signs, but I ignored them all. He cried a lot. In the beginning, he refused to play with me. He would hide. He was a shy, scared child, and it took him a long time to adjust to us. But I never questioned anything, because no one encouraged me to. In our small town, people talk. At school, they teased me, saying my cousin didn't look like us, that he was different. There was even a day when a staff member, seeing me crying because of those cruel jokes, made a comment that went over my head at the time, but now seems like the key to the whole mystery. She said no one ever knew my aunt was pregnant, and there was something strange about that. The most glaring thing about all of this is the birth date. I know for a fact I was 5 when my cousin came into our family, yet according to his birth date, we're only 3 years apart. Then, I was 12 when I went on vacation with my best friend. I remember being super excited. I had never left the town I lived in, and in my innocence, that trip felt like going to the other side of the world. I was going to be a real explorer. On our way back, we stopped at a gas station. That's where, between the magazines and the snacks, my mind really started to question everything. I was waiting for my friend's mom to pay for what we had bought when I saw a picture of a missing child. At the time, I couldn't explain it, but something about the photo caught my attention. The baby had a mark on one of his cheeks, a mark just like my cousin's. And above the picture, the word "missing" was written. I spent the entire ride home thinking about it, and when I finally told my mom, she was visibly shaken. She turned red and told me all babies look alike, that I must be confused, and I believed her, because she was my mom, and I trusted her. But deep down, that photo never left my mind. A few years later, I met a guy at school who had been adopted, and I felt an enormous sense of relief. That had to be it. My cousin was adopted too. It was the simplest, easiest explanation to accept. In a small town like ours, where people love to gossip, it made sense that my aunt and uncle had kept that detail hidden. People can be cruel, and they don't understand that adoption is an act of love. It's choosing to have a child, regardless of blood. Besides, I've always believed blood doesn't mean anything. What truly matters, what defines who your parents are, is who loves and takes care of you. So that idea comforted me for many years. Until 2 months ago, when everything fell apart and all the lies crumbled. I'm in my first year of criminology, and for one of our research assignments, I had to analyze missing children's case files. When I saw the photo again, I knew instantly. I wasn't a child anymore, easy to manipulate. I was an adult now, and I knew that child was my cousin. I knew him better than anyone else. I had grown up with him. That baby in the photo was my cousin. Liam, that was his name. He was 1.5 years old when he disappeared. According to the report, his mother, exhausted, fell asleep for just a few moments in a park in Nebraska. And when she woke up, the stroller was empty. Her son was gone. Everything clicked together in the worst way possible. That secret I had unknowingly carried for years was finally revealed. My cousin wasn't adopted. He was kidnapped. Since then, I've been trapped in a maze of emotions, lost. I know the truth needs to come out. Someone, somewhere, is still suffering from the loss of their child. Someone lives in uncertainty, not knowing what happened. My aunt and uncle committed a terrible crime, and my parents probably covered it up. I know I have to speak up. My cousin deserves that. But at the same time, I know it will destroy everything. It will destroy the life my cousin knows. And that scares me. I'm especially afraid for him because I know it will cause irreparable damage. I'm afraid of being responsible for bursting the bubble of happiness my family has built. Afraid of what will come next. Afraid of losing everything. But the truth is lurking. And I don't know how much longer I can hold out before everything comes crashing down, and I tell everyone what I know. Hey, Horror Spectator here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you're always in the loop when new videos drop. We post 2 videos every week. If you're really into this content, consider sharing it with your friends. It really helps us grow this community. Now, let's move on to the second story. As far back as I can remember, my family has been like a shadow. I never knew my father. The only people I grew up with were my maternal grandparents and my mom. I don't have many childhood memories, mostly because there aren't many happy ones. And from what I've read now, as an adult, about trauma, some people's brains tend to block out negative experiences over time. My mom was always emotionally unstable, and I grew up hearing my grandparents say that she couldn't take care of herself, let alone me. The 4 of us lived in a house, and the atmosphere was completely toxic. My grandfather was a violent man. Although he never hit me, I know he used to hit my grandmother and my mom. Over the years, my grandparents constantly tried to turn me against my mother. But as time passed, I realized the story was way more complicated than they let on. Yes, they were the ones who raised me, not my mom. She was almost always depressed, lying in bed, often with the door closed. But even so, she was the only person in the house I felt love for. I could never love my grandparents, and 2 years ago, I finally understood why. I must have been around 5 years old the first time I witnessed something strange between my mom and my grandpa. The memories are vague. I remember my grandma sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window. I saw her smile, but right after, a tear rolled down her face. Curious, I walked toward the back door that led to a messy yard full of weeds. When I got there, I saw my grandpa in a corner, grabbing my mom tightly. He had his arms around her in what looked like a hug, but it disturbed me. She looked tiny in his arms, not just because she was smaller, but because she was curled up like a caged animal. I don't remember what happened next, but my next memory was a few years later, when I was about 10. It was nighttime, and I woke up to the sound of muffled crying. It sounded like my mom. It wasn't unusual for her to have crying fits, but something told me to check if she was okay. I got out of my room, and as I passed the hallway, I noticed my grandparents' bedroom door was slightly open. I peeked inside and saw my grandma sitting on the bed, alone. My grandpa wasn't there. I thought that was strange. I turned toward my mom's room, but her door was locked. That was even stranger. Her door was never locked, even when she spent days in there. I called her name, but didn't get a response. That's when my grandma appeared next to me, with a sad look on her face, and told me to go back to bed. I asked about Grandpa, but without looking at me, She just said it wasn't my business and that I shouldn't leave my room at night. There was such deep sadness on her face that I wanted to cry. I knew something was very wrong, but at that age, I couldn't have possibly imagined the true horror we were living in. As the years went by, the tension in the house got worse and worse. I spent as much time as I could outside, but I had to be back by 7 p.m. Otherwise, my grandpa would come looking for me. He was a controlling man. He didn't let my grandma or my mom leave the house. I suspect the only reason he let me go out was because I was a boy, and also, if he locked me in, the neighbors would start talking. When I turned 16, it became unbearable to live in that oppressive environment. I made the decision to run away. It's the biggest regret of my life. I ran away and left my mom behind. At that moment, I was just a kid who wanted to live. In that house, I felt like they were draining the life out of me. My mom, with her deep depression, my grandma, with her passivity and indifference, and my grandpa, with his obsessive and violent behavior. I completely cut off contact with them. For a few years, I bounced from friend's house to friend's house, and at times, I even lived on the streets. About 2 years ago, when I was 22, I got involved in a small fight. Actually, I was trying to break up two guys who were about to kill each other. I ended up getting hurt and had to go to the hospital. I was sitting there, waiting to be seen, when suddenly I saw a woman being rushed in on a stretcher, covered in blood. When I looked at her face, the shock hit me like a ton of bricks. It was my mom. I can't even describe what I felt. It was like all the years of abuse came crashing down on me all at once, mixed with immense guilt for leaving her behind, knowing she was a victim too. That same day, I went to the police and reported my grandparents. My grandpa was arrested immediately and has been in custody awaiting trial. My grandma, on the other hand, is in a more complicated situation. While she was a victim, she was also complicit for never speaking up about what was happening. I found out that my mom had been abused by her own father since she was 10 years old. One of the worst revelations was learning that several neighbors knew, or, at the very least, suspected, but no one ever said anything. I thought a lot about whether I should share this story. Now I know I have to tell it, as many times as it takes, so that this kind of crime doesn't continue to happen in silence, year after year. As for my mom, I know she'll never be completely healthy after everything she's been through, but I've promised myself that I will never abandon her again. I'll always be by her side. As for my grandma, I don't know what's going to happen to her, and honestly, I don't know if I'm ready to find out. But as for my grandpa, I'm going to fight to make sure he never lives in freedom again.